You ready? Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. We're about to start this talk, so if you could please, everyone, take your seats, settle down a little bit. This is Kevin Shaw. He's an engaging local historian who's involved in numerous projects in the South Central region of Pennsylvania. As a graduate of Mechanicsburg Area High School and lifelong member of the community, he has a keen interest in preserving its valuable history for future generations and a passion for bringing its personal anecdotes to life for all ages. With a focus on local Civil War and early Native American activities, he presents relevant talks and displays for various organizations. He's involved with the historical Lincoln Cemetery on West Winding Hill Road and speaks at their Memorial Day services. He currently serves as a board member of the Shiremanstown Historical Society, West Shore Historical Society, and Friends of the Peace Church, and belongs to the Cumberland County Historical Society and the Mechanicsburg Museum Association. So, welcome, Kevin. I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. Good evening. Can you hear me okay? Am I loud enough? As Alexis said, my name is Kevin Shaw, and I grew up in the township out on East Winding Hill Road. The things that I have up front here, you can take a look at later. The reason I brought some Native American things is because I hunted them here. Almost everything in the front here, all of this and these, I found myself. There's over 100 pieces here. And these were from the old apple orchard that was on East Winding Hill Road that is now all houses. And I see a neighbor here, the dog walker, or one of them. So when they started putting the road system in over in our area in '08, I started hunting the mounds, the topsoil. And I found a bunch of stuff. There's a few really nice pieces in here. So if you're interested after the talk, just ask me questions and I'll tell you what they are. Some of these pieces were found down where Simpson Park is now. This piece right here, which is a nutting stone, was found in the Yellow Breeches Creek, right next to where the old, the covered bridge that's now at Messiah. They moved that in 70 or 71. And I found that 30 years ago or so in the water. So they're all local things. This is kind of a unique looking thing. Most people don't know what that would be. It's in the shape of a foot. And it's a last. It's for making like moccasins. I found 5 of them over there, but I only brought 1. Because tonight we're focusing on Upper Allen in the Civil War. So the other things I brought here are basically Civil War related. I've got a number of cases of artifacts from Gettysburg, PA. They were dug in the 1950s, so it wasn't illegal at that time. I don't have any illegal stuff. And the rifles here are all replicas. They're modern made. This is an 1864 non-commissioned officer's saber, which is a dress saber. This wouldn't have been in combat, but this was made by Ames and Sons of Chicopee Falls, Massachusetts, and that's the real thing. Everything else is replicas. So let me get my notes and we'll get going here. How many of you grew up in Upper Allen Township or have lived here for a number of years? Okay, quite a few. And I know Phil back there, you've been in the township 24 years or something? Yeah. Now, if I can find my book. It's a yes, thank you. Not always that scatterbrain, but sometimes. So what I'm going to do tonight instead of giving like a lecture, I'm going to try to relay some information to you that you might not have known. And I'd like to start out by saying I grew up going to Upper Allen, up on the hill up here, Upper Allen Elementary School, and then junior high and senior high, Mechanicsburg. I did not know that Mechanicsburg was the northernmost town taken in the American Civil War. They never taught us that in school. We didn't know about the events that took place nearby, like at the Peace Church, that was part of a battlefield. And they didn't teach us that. I don't know if the curriculum's any better now, but I'd like to take part in advancing that to some degree, because the history is all around us. No matter where you live, there is history of that area. And especially young people should be made known, it should be made known to them so they get interested, because as Alexis read, I'm a member of different historical societies, and almost all of us have white hair. So unless we get young people involved, I don't know who's going to keep up with this stuff. So we don't want that to die out. But Mechanicsburg was the northernmost town taken. And I wanted to give a brief, without getting too much, as far as the name goes, I was asked months ago for the newsletter, and I said Civil War comes to Upper Allen 1863. But in the notes that I've been compiling on our local history of this area, I'm calling this lesson 2 of history series of Upper Allen Township, Cumberland County, Pennsylvania, because it's going to be much broader than just what happened here in the Civil War, which really wasn't that much. So this is lesson 1. Lesson 1 that I did would have been a talk I did here on the Lincoln Cemetery. And I'm referring to tonight's talk as Confederate Raiders of '63. So without getting into too much detail, it's important to understand the events that led to the invasion of the Army of Northern Virginia in June of 1863. And whether you know a lot about the Civil War, our Civil War, or very little, there are some things that we need to understand. On Friday, April 12th, 1861, firing on Fort Sumter in Charleston, South Carolina began our Civil War. And in the early stages of the conflict, the South was winning most of the major land battles, almost all of them. For one thing, people put down McClellan as being a terrible leader. He won a couple battles in the Peninsular Campaign of '62, so he wasn't all that bad. But usually the South was winning all the major battles. And part of that was because Lincoln was having trouble finding a good general to lead the Northern armies. And as time went by, well, one thing Lincoln did at the very beginning was he started something called the Anaconda Plan. And what that was choking off the ports in the South, because England and France were sending supplies to the Southerners. Part of that was because when we were blockading, and I say we, I had ancestors on both sides, the North was blockading the Southern ports. Cotton wasn't getting out. And cotton was a huge part of our economy in those days, but it wasn't getting to the textile mills in Europe. So they wanted that to be freed up again. And by the summer of 1863, the Anaconda Plan was working, and it was choking off the South. So a lot of us, if you had ancestors that served in either army, you don't think about that, because the regular soldiers, like we have a book here, I have a book that I'm going to be talking a little bit about. This was a Daniel Coughlin lived in Upper Allen Township. He went in '62, and he served till '65, the summer of '65. And his father worked in it was a tannery, which wasn't far from here. And then when he got back from the service, he also worked at that tannery. But this is a book that was compiled by Beverly Bone of the Mechanicsburg Museum Association, and it's of his letters. And she didn't change anything. So the English isn't very good. He used words that we wouldn't use today that we would consider foul, derogatory. But it's very interesting to look at the war through the eyes of someone who was there and who was in the fighting. So what happened was as supplies were getting scarce, of course, Antietam was September 17th of 1862, where Lee tried to come north for the first time, and he was pushed back at Antietam. It's considered to be a Union victory, but if you study that battle, nobody won. 22,000 casualties in one day. Now, a casualty was wounded, captured, killed, or mortally wounded in action. And a lot of those people died weeks or even months later from their injuries. So they were pushed back south. And in the beginning of 1863, the Confederate Congress told Lee, why don't you go north? Go north for supplies, because they didn't have anything. The South was choked, and they were running out of things, and the Union was destroying many things, crops and everything, and using them up. And when you look at the American Civil War, the population of the United States was about 9 million in the South. 4 million of them were slaves. And there were about 21 million in the North, which is amazing that the Confederacy was winning for so long. But by the summer of 63, supplies were very scarce. So Lee was told, why don't you go north again? And they thought that by having a major victory on northern soil, that perhaps France or England would come into the fight on the side of the South. So they set their sights on Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. It was the capital since 1812. And they thought, if we can take Harrisburg and then move toward Philadelphia or New York, at that time it was Hooker was the general in charge of the Union. Hooker would follow them, and they could choose high ground to fight and be victorious, like they were at Fredericksburg in December of 1862, which was a real debacle for the Union. So Lee set his sights on Harrisburg. And these were the events that led up to our peaceful valley around here and the neighboring towns and villages being invaded by 65 to 70,000 Confederate troops. And following up behind them, coming up north from the south, were about 90 to 95,000 Union troops, well-supplied Union troops. So this resulted in what major land battle? Gettysburg. That's right, which of course is world famous now. But at that time, there were only about 2,000 citizens there, and Pennsylvania College, which they call Gettysburg College now. But they did not intend on fighting at that point. Things just led up to that. So before the Battle of Chancellorsville, which was May 2nd and 3rd of 1863, the Army of Northern Virginia was divided into two corps under General James Longstreet and General Thomas Jonathan Jackson. And on the night of May 2nd, Jackson went out on a spying mission with an entourage of guys and was shot by his own troops as he came back to the lines. That was May 2nd. He died May 10th, which was a Sunday morning. And I had ancestors in the 10th Virginia Infantry, which fought under Stonewall Jackson, a number of them. So I'm going to do a brief overview too of, you want to bring the map up, please? Yes. Okay, let me get to the pointer there. So the bottom down here would have been where they were encamped across from each other, which would have been at Fredericksburg after that battle, December 12th and 13th of 62. They were camped across the river from each other. It's the Rappahannock. And they came north. So they were down here, and as they came up, they ran into Union troopers the whole way up. Now this was cavalry. Thank you. Cavalry mostly. And the cavalry acted as a screening guard of the main bodies of infantry. These guys were walking, they were pretty slow. Guys on horseback could really move. So they were like the F-15s of the day. I mean, cavalry was something else. But as they came north, up through Rockville, well, this is Jeb Stuart's ride right here. Fought Battle of Hanover, the 30th of June, 1863. But as they were coming north, they kept running into Union. And over here at Winchester, Confederate infantry ran into a major pocket of Union. And that was the Second Battle of Winchester. There were 3 major battles and 10 or 12 minor ones. But this was the Second Battle of Winchester that took place here. And this ball may have come from there. This is a 12-pound solid shot. Those of you who have been to these talks before know that. This was found about 1/3 of a mile east of the Peace Church in Camp Hill. And the reason I say that is may have come from down there is because the cannon that were set up at the Peace Church were Union cannon that were captured at Winchester. They captured 22, another account said 26 Union artillery pieces, and the powder and the balls. So when they got up here, they were using a lot of Union stuff. But as they came up, each one of these marks here, I think there's 40, there's 44. These were all cavalry actions. And there were major battles as they came north. But what was becoming clear is that the Confederates were not kicking the Union as bad as they were before, because they almost always won. But when they got to, it was Battle of Brandy Station, June 9th of 1863. There were roughly 17,000 cavalry, about 8,500 men on each side, and they fought for 12 hours. And the Union held their own. They did very well. And from that point on, the tide changed. So we're going to go over a few things that happened locally here. As the Confederates were coming north, as I said, a lot of the reason for them coming up into the Union territory was for supplies. So when they got across the border into Pennsylvania, Franklin, they came through Chambersburg, Franklin County, Adams County, York County, and Cumberland County. And then they went back to Adams County where Gettysburg is. They went to all the farms within 20 to sometimes up to 50 miles from the main body. And they were taking horses, mules, chickens, pigs, cows, oxen. I mean, to feed that many people at any given time, wherever the armies were, that was the most populated city in the state. And that happened in different states because cities weren't that big back then. So these guys had to eat. They say an army moves on its stomach. If they can't eat, they can't keep moving. So they were taking everything they could get. When they got into these 4 counties and were coming north, hopefully going to take Harrisburg, we estimate that there were probably around 900 to 1,100, say 1,000 horses and mules that were confiscated by them. Theirs were dying off. The American Civil War cost possibly as many as 1 million. Some estimates say 3 million horses and mules. They ran them to death. They were forced to pull wagons and they rode them to death too. And I've often said, what a shame for a horse or a mule that was used on a farm. Think how quiet that was all the time. There were no planes or anything. And here they were taken. And they were forced into battlefields where they'd never even heard gunshots except during hunting, not right over their head. A lot of them really freaked out too, killed their riders and things like that. So it was absolutely horrible, not just for the men, but for the animals too. So let's go to just going through. Okay, this is Richard Baldy Ewell. He was made a Corps commander after Jackson was killed. He took Carlisle in the end of June of 63, and he had between 12 and perhaps as many as 15,000 Confederate infantry. So they took Carlisle and they held it for about 4 days. They did a bombardment. There's scars on the front of the old courthouse there in Carlisle. So he was the general in charge of the corps that was coming up first, followed by Longstreet and then A.P. Hill, Ambrose Powell Hill. He became a corps commander after Jackson was killed. This guy is Albert Gallatin Jenkins, and he was a brigadier general under Ewell. He's the guy that took Mechanicsburg. They came in from Carlisle. It was a Sunday morning, June 28th, and they came into Mechanicsburg. They stopped at where the two roads come together west of Mechanicsburg, and they could see with their spyglass there was a U.S. flag flying in the square, Mechanicsburg. So he sent some troopers to get the flag and to check out if there were Union troops here. And well, I'll get to that when we get to Burgess Hummel's place. So the next one, please. This is Darius Couch. He was the Union commander. He was the general that was in charge of the defense of Harrisburg. And they built a fort, Couch, in Lemoyne up on the high point, realized, there's another higher point to the west. They built another fort. These are earthen forts. And they named that one Fort Washington. So he was the Union guy that was in charge of the defenses of Harrisburg. Next, please. So this is a photo taken from one of the steeples in Mechanicsburg, circa 1861. And this is Main Street, Mechanicsburg. So that's what it looked like at that time. This is the John Coover house. As they were coming into the town, this is on the left. The house is still there. It's got a different siding on it now, but the house is still there. Then they kept advancing to the east. I know some of you know what that is from the other talks. That's our library now, Mechanicsburg Library. That was a grain warehouse at that time. Next. Okay, this is George Hummel's house. He was the Burgess of Mechanicsburg. He's the one that had the flag. And when these Confederates got to the square and asked the townspeople, where's the flag? We saw it flying. They said, well, Burgess Hummel took it. So they went to his house. They said, where's he live? They said 312 East Main Street. So they banged on the front door and he came to the door and they said, where's the flag? Where's the American flag? He said, I don't know. And they said, well, we have 2 artillery pieces set up west of town. If you don't turn the flag over to us, we're going to open fire on the town. So he went and got it and gave it to him. So that was the fall of Mechanicsburg, as I said, the northernmost town taken during our Civil War. Another thing, as they came in, they had flanking troops off on both sides that were coming through the town. And the ones that were to the south of Mechanicsburg which Mechanicsburg's that way, they could see earthworks on a hill south of Mechanicsburg as when they went past, South York Street. So they told Jenkins about it, and he sent some troops out to what is now Chestnut Hill Cemetery. It was started in 1862, so they were still in the process of building it. Now they came right past this. A lot of you know where the Harkness House is. That's on South York Street, is right here. I'm sorry, right here. Comes in here. This is Chestnut Hill Cemetery, and this is where they would have seen dirt from where they were digging graves and things. So they sent word back to Jenkins that it was not Union. Another quick thing I'm going to say too. A lot of people think these Confederates were scaredy cats or something. They were. After the fighting that they had gone through coming north, they had met their match with Union cavalry, and they didn't know where the main body of the Union Army was. So they had reason to be afraid. I mean, they were in enemy territory, and Jenkins only had about 800 men. So at any given time, he thought he might run into, 20, 30,000 Union and their cavalry. So yeah, they were afraid. But when they got here to the hill, Chestnut Hill, which is over the hill from here, they sent some troops back into Mechanicsburg to tell him that it was just a cemetery being built. And they proceeded on up into Shepherdstown, which, if you know where Shepherdstown is, it's right over here. That's Shepherdstown. They would have come right up this road, and here at the top is where Old 15, Route 15 crosses over. This church has been changed dramatically. This is the old Union Hotel, built in 1860 by Jacob Zook. That's the Union Hotel. It had many different names. This was the Spar House and store. It was a general merchandise store. It was also the post office. And when the Confederates went in any place, they were looking for stamps, money, anything they could get. U.S. Post Office was a target. They went to that post office, and the postmistress said she didn't have anything because they knew the Confederates were coming. So everybody had taken their horses and mules over the hill. They hid whatever animals they could because they knew that they would be taken and eaten or used. So this is the Spar. That's the house. This is the store. Again, the Hilltop House, which is only one of two places in Upper Allen Township that are on the National Register of Historic Places. The other one is a stone bridge. This was William C. Davis. He goes by Jack Davis. And if any of you are readers of Civil War books, this guy wrote over 60. And he is a lecturer. He lived in the Hilltop House for 30 years, roughly 1990, or no, wait, no. It was about 30 years, 70 to 90. He was the editor-in-chief of Civil War Times and History Illustrated in Harrisburg. And he knows more about the American Civil War probably than anybody else. And he's still doing lectures. The reason he left this area is because he got a job as a professor in Blacksburg, Virginia. And I think he's with the National Park Service now, I believe. Another picture of it. Chicken and waffles. They were famous for that. Fuel pumps. But the road's still dirt here. So it's the 1930s. This is a mill in Grantham, and that must be the back shot of it. The Hilltop House, when I was a kid, the Stefanins the family lived in that, and that was their home. The Liningers lived in this place, but that's the back of it. That's down in Grantham, down by the creek. And that mill, if you drive past it, the road is like an S curve. And there is a stone next to the front door, which is on the other end. It says 1776. The mills of the Yellow Breeches, over a 150-year period, there were 42, maybe 44 different mills. This was a really big area for mills. Yellow Breeches was a great source of power. So that was the Grantham Mill. I'm showing that because this is Upper Allen Township. That's the book by Beverly. Okay, so this is Daniel Coughlin's grave. As you see, he was born in 44 and he died in 75 of unknown causes. We're not sure why he died, but he's buried in Chestnut Hill Cemetery. He lived in Upper Allen Township his whole life, except when he was in the service. And so he was only 31 years old. This is the Lincoln Cemetery. A lot of you are familiar with that. This is the entranceway to it. Cemetery's back here in the woods. It was cleaned up by the Vietnam veterans of Mechanicsburg in '97, and they keep it clean and beautiful. The tombstones are back here. There are about 80 tombstones. They think there's about 200 people buried in there. Now, this was a Negro cemetery, and that's what they called it, a Negro cemetery. They didn't let the whites and the blacks be buried together. But these vets went in there and cleaned that place up, and they maintain it. And we have Memorial Day services there every year. And we've been getting about 80 or 90, sometimes around 100 people. So there are 12 USCT troops buried in there. That's United States Colored Troops that we have names of. And I found out just this past spring, a guy I was talking to in Harrisburg said that he said, you know about the Shirk brothers? And I didn't. So there's 14 that we know of, and we have the names for. And they are U.S. Colored Troops, veterans that served in the American Civil War. This is the Peace Church, and this photo is probably circa 1895 to 1910. This is St. John's Church Road. It's down about here now. This is such a steep bank. When you walk around the end of that building, you have to be careful that you don't fall because you'd end up down on the road. It's way down now. And I bait the mouse bait traps that are around the building. I'm a member there too. So we're very proud of that place. We're getting it back from Pennsylvania Historic and Museum Commission any day now. Been saying that since January, so it might not happen this year, but that's being turned back over to the Friends of the Peace Church. And the Friends are celebrating, we just celebrated our 50th year about 3 weeks ago. So that's the Peace Church. There were 2 artillery pieces set up here, 2 down on Trindle Road facing to the east. They were 8-pounders, so they didn't shoot this. But over on Market Street in Camp Hill, which becomes Route 11, there was a Confederate battery manned by Witcher and his men, and they were firing 12-pounders. And the New York militia they were shooting at had 12-pounders. So this becomes Trindle Road. This becomes Route 11. This goes down, if you followed this down, it would come down to the bottleneck in Lemoyne. This is an artist's rendition of Confederates that moved in on the Union, pushed them back, set up an artillery piece, were driven away from it, and then came back and took it again. And one of the Confederates was shot through the leg, captured. They amputated his leg. He died. He's buried in the Harrisburg Cemetery. There are 3 Confederates buried over there. But this is an artist's rendition of that action. Do we have a picture of that? Did we put a photo up on the, okay. That's too bad because I have a picture of that. That was raised in 1969. That was called the Oyster Point Hotel. It's spelled Oyster. It was a German name. They pronounced it Oyster. Everybody calls it Oyster, which is okay. It's Americanized, but that building is gone. It's too bad they didn't save it. Okay, some more local history. I'm a building contractor, and a few years ago, my brother and I were working in a house outside of Dillsburg, a friend of ours that we grew up with. And he had a picture hanging on the wall of the dining room. This house was built in the 1840s. It's got 12-foot high ceilings. And I see this picture of a Union soldier with a kepi. He had a kepi on, you know, the little caps with the brim. That's him. This is a different picture. And I tried to get him to give me a copy of the other one, which I'll get, but his name is David Bowman. And he went in 62, and he served Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry, was in the 7th Pennsylvania, which a lot of guys from Mechanicsburg were in the 7th Pennsylvania, and from Upper Allen Township here too. So that was David Bowman, and a friend of mine I went to school with, her sister is married to David Bowman. His probably third great grandson. And that's who Bowmansdale was named for. So more local history. This is the Winding Hill Mennonite Cemetery. If you go out the road out here, where you cross over the bridge to go over Route 15, it's on your left. And that's Bowman's tombstone. I just went and took the picture Saturday. I didn't know it was in there. Although I knew his great-granddaughter, Pearl Bowman. She was one of my neighbors growing up. So that's David Bowman. Okay, Mechanicsburg. Everybody knows about Mechanicsburg Cemetery. This was Henry Zinn. He was a colonel. And this statue was put up there for him, I think 1910. He was a hero. Again, he was in the 7th Pennsylvania. And at Antietam, he had a horse shot out from under him on the sunken road. And so he was on the ground then. And as they were being pushed back by the Confederates, the color bearer went down and he picked up the US flag and he was running back to the lines with it and he was killed. So that guy died at Antietam. That would have been September 17th of 1862. Oh, I'm sorry. One more thing. Although he was killed at Antietam and they have a statue to him in Mechanicsburg, he's not buried there. He's buried in Mount Olivet, which is right over Boiling Springs. So I'm not sure why, but that's how it goes. So these guys, this is a GAR outfit, which is Grand Army of the Republic. It's a veterans group that was, they were Union soldiers that had served in the war. And these guys are all of Shiremanstown. And I'm affiliated with the Shiremanstown Historical Society too. And these names here, kind of interesting. Shireman, Shiremanstown. I think this was David Shireman, and his dad was the one it was named after in 1874. But I graduated in 75. We had our 50th anniversary just this last Saturday. And a good friend of mine was there, Tim Strasball, 2 Seiferts, Annan Seifert, and another guy, Dave Seifert. Annan's a female. And Dave Seifert, he was a real good wrestler. We were good friends. But it's funny how all these names kind of sound, you know, people, even though people move around a lot of people stay where they are, have been, you know, so their families. But these are Civil War muskets. Okay, John White Geary. If any of you have been to Gettysburg, which I'm sure some of you have, up on Culp's Hill, there's a statue of John White Geary. He was born in Westmoreland County. Oh, you did put some stuff up of him. Okay. This guy was 6'6.5", 250 pounds, which for that day, he was a big man. He was a major, maybe he was a brigadier general, but he fought at Gettysburg. This guy, after Governor Curtin did his 2 terms, he was elected governor of Pennsylvania. He served 2 terms as governor of Pennsylvania. He also was a governor of one of the territories out west, which is now a state. I can't think of which one it was. And then he moved on to San Francisco. He set up the public school system in San Francisco. He donated the land that became Union Square in San Francisco. This guy did a lot of stuff. And when he was 53 years old, he was fixing breakfast for one of his sons. Oh, one of his sons died in his arm at, it was in Georgia. I can't think of the battlefield. But he lived, there's Geary Avenue in New Cumberland, and he was living there, and he was fixing breakfast for his son, and he fell over from a heart attack at 53 years old. That guy probably would have been president someday if he'd lived long enough. He was very well known. He had a cannonball bounce off his head. He was wounded at Gettysburg 3 times, groin, ankle, arm. He was a tough character. Okay, that's the picture at Culp's Hill. And if you haven't been there for a while, Lisa and I were out there 2 years ago. They're reclaiming a lot of the hill, which became woods. And they're cleaning it out now so it looks more like you can see where the Confederates charged up the hill. And in fact, if you're standing there at his statue, about in here, there are still earthworks. Because I was standing there looking at it, and I said to Lisa, look at that. She said, what? I said, those are earthworks. And I have a couple pictures on my phone of that. During the battle, the Union had time to dig a trench, push the soil to the south a little bit, the way the Confederates were coming up, and put logs across the top. So the Confederates were unable to get through that. It was a major fighting point. And a lot of you don't know, but Wesley Culp died on that hill. He grew up there in Gettysburg, and he was fighting for the South. Before the war, he moved down to Virginia and was working. He joined a militia. When the war began, the militias were mustered into the regular army. So he found himself at Gettysburg, where he grew up fighting for the South. Here's another Mechanicsburgian. I think he was from Upper Allen here. Jacob Heffelfinger. He had a distinction of serving a good bit of the war in prisons. He was captured twice. He survived the war. A lot of captured guys did not. It's not the best picture, but he was in the 7th Pennsylvania as well. So that's Jacob Heffelfinger. I have a book up here. It's open. This is a little story. This tells you about him. Part of his diary is in here. Getting toward, that's it? Okay. So the artifacts that I have here, I've been collecting for 30 some years, some of the stuff 40 years. I've had a lifelong interest in the American Civil War. I didn't bring as much as I usually take to shows because I was going to be talking about Upper Allen. One more footnote here. Ooh, time's pretty good because at quarter of we usually start a question and answer. When I was talking about Jenkins, Albert Gallatin Jenkins, I was to his house probably 35 years ago. It's now West Virginia, but it's called Green Bottom, and it was a 7,000 acre plantation. Now, he was killed at the age of 32. He was married, had 3 children. He was a lawyer. He was a congressman. but he became a Confederate general. And he's the one that took the Peace Church. When they were withdrawn from the Mechanicsburg area, actually Ewell got word from Lee to come back to Adams County because they had run into the Union Army. And both sides, the troops were just pouring in. And he didn't get the news till the end of the first day. And Ewell and his men took off from Carlisle, and he forgot to leave word with Jenkins that they were withdrawing. So then we had the Battle of Sporting Hill, which was the 30th of June. That really shouldn't have happened out there because they should have withdrawn already, but he didn't know. So when they got to Gettysburg, Jenkins went into battle on the second day. A cannonball exploded in front of him and his horse, killed the horse, and wounded him severely. He survived that, and a year later, he had just retaken his command about 2 months before at Cloyd's Mountain, which is down in southwestern Virginia. He was involved in fighting again. He had been wounded at Gettysburg severely in his left arm and in his head. And he was wounded again about a year later, captured, his arm was amputated, and he died a few days later. So if you read any of the local books about the events that happened here, everybody kind of puts him down. The one thing that he did do, Jenkins was the first Confederate officer to be on Northern soil. He and his men raided Ohio in 1862. So they were the first ones on Union soil. And they did a 1,500-mile forced march. I mean, they were on horseback. And all the towns they went through, they gathered up the valuables, put them in the square, and burned them. They caused over $5 million worth of damage. So that was an incredible amount of money at that time. So he may have been a bonehead in some ways, but I mean, he wasn't such a bad officer for the Confederacy. And speaking of money, another talk that I do, I spoke a good bit about the economic effects of the American Civil War on this country. When the war began, the Union was spending about $1 million a day on the war effort. And by the end of the war, 4 years later, it was up to about $3 million a day. And that's incomprehensible because I don't even know what $1 million then would be worth today. But I don't think we ever really recovered from it. And I know from living down in Florida for a while and being at all the different battlefields going back and forth, there's still a lot of scars from the Civil War in Atlanta, Savannah. You go through the Richmond. I mean, they cleaned up a lot, but there are still ruins that you can see. And that's, 160 some years ago. So any questions? Any questions or comments? Yes, sir. The gentleman asked, what's the time difference from when the Confederates were here, the cavalry, and when Jeb Stuart finally got to Carlisle? About 3 days. When they were still in Virginia, and everybody says, oh, he went on a roundabout. He was goofing off, glory seeking. That's not what he was doing. They were tearing up railroad tracks. They wrecked the canal. They tore up miles and miles of telegraph. And he made it 160 miles in 4 days, even though they had to keep stopping to rest the horses and reshoe them. And that's another thing, the logistics of moving 100,000 men or 60,000, that was incredible. You had to feed them. And the fields of Virginia didn't have much food left. You could only carry enough for your horse for about a day. So they had to stop, and they were always near water. Men have to have water, animals have to have water. And so everybody complains. And if you ever watched the movie Gettysburg, when he finally got there on the evening of the second day, Lee was upset with him. And he was. But Stuart was not goofing around. So it was about 3 days. The Battle of Hanover was June 30th, also, June 30th. And so there again, he ran into the rear end of the Union troops. And that battle kind of took up that day too. But Jeb Stuart was a fantastic leader. I've visited his grave, and he's kind of one of my heroes, even though he was a rebel. Like I said, I had rebels in my family too. My mom's people were from Virginia. So any other questions or comments? Yes, ma'am. Yes. The lady asked if there was any evidence of the Underground Railroad here. There's a house in Boiling Springs that was a major depot. And there's a state marker right in front of it. But being involved in different historical societies, there's always people talking about different places. I'm on the West Shore Historical Society too. And we were supposed to go look at a place in New Cumberland. And the house, it's not real close to the river. It's a half a block up. But the basement has a tunnel in it. And anytime you find a tunnel, it was part of the Underground Railroad. And the Underground Railroad was very pronounced. One of my heroes of that era is, the lady, they called her Moses. Somebody help me here. Harriet Tubman. I don't know how I could forget that. She was an incredible lady. She brought over 300 people, including her family, north. And the things she did, I mean, she was a gutsy lady. She carried a pistol. And there were some times where she would be the conductor for 10 or 12 people, and some of them wanted to go back. And she'd pull her pistol out of her skirt and aim it at their head and say, either you come with us or you're going to stay here dead. And she would have too. She never had to shoot anybody. But if somebody had gone back, they'd have got caught, and then they'd have ratted out the rest of the party. So yes, the Underground Railroad was very prevalent through this whole area. I mean, Mechanicsburg, people passed through here. It's a famous story happened in Carlisle. I think it was 1848. Slave catchers. They passed the Fugitive Slave Act. And the federal government declared that anybody assisting slaves in escaping would be violating federal law. And Carlisle we're pretty close to the border, you know, if you think about it. It's not that far to the Mason-Dixon line. And there were slaves in Pennsylvania. That Harkness house we looked at, that was built 1783 to 1788. He was a Revolutionary War hero. He was also a slave owner. And that's what the Lincoln Cemetery came from. And I know everybody says, oh, it was started in 1862. No, it wasn't. No, there were bodies being buried in there because they segregated people in death. And I think there's probably over 300 bodies in there. And if we can get it on the National Register and someday get a grant to do a ground penetrating radar, we will find some things out, and that would be wonderful. But yeah, the so-called Underground Railroad was all through this area. So I don't know that. Yeah. It's apartment. How old was the house? Do you know how old the house was? There were a lot of Mennonites, Quakers. They were big on rescuing people. I mean, they put their lives in danger for those people. They were real heroes, and other religious people, but especially those two groups. They really rescued a lot of people at their own danger. If you've ever been to the Dobbin House in Gettysburg, that's the Reverend Dobbin built that in I think 1776. There's a place where you're going up to the second floor where they put a plexiglass on the side of the steps. That was a hiding place. So we know that was one. But there's a lot of places that we'll never know. A lot of them went up into Ohio. Jenkins, where he lived, is right on the Ohio River in what is now West Virginia. It was Virginia at that time. And I was there, and you can stand there and you can look across that river. It's not real wide, about 3 times as wide as the Yellow Breeches down here. That's Ohio on the other side. And a lot of them went through that way too. If they were further south, the slaves often headed south. And a lot of them ended up in the Everglades. And a lot of them were very skilled workers, iron workers, gunsmiths. And that's why during the early 1800s, the US government had 3 major wars with what we call the Seminole. They were never conquered. A lot of them were black. They were mixed. They were accepted into that society. And that's another good story. I got a book called Black Indians, and that's exactly what it's about. They never surrendered to the US Army or signed a treaty, but that's how they were able to do that. They helped each other. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that Fort Couch was not the best location, the highest point, and a second point was selected. Where was that?
To the west. I think it's Fort Street, where Winnie lived. We worked on her house there. There's still, you can see I mean, you can go up there, there's markers. Civil War and more in Mechanicsburg. Jim Schmick that has the Civil War store. He's been instrumental in getting at least 8 or maybe 10 markers put out. And there are markers down there, and you can go up on the hill, up by Negley Park, and you can see the gun emplacements and everything. There wasn't any fighting up there, but they were definitely digging in because they knew the Rebs were coming.
So that site is not Fort Couch. Fort Couch is someplace else.
No, Fort Couch was up there, but if you stand up where Fort Couch was, to the west a little bit is a little bit of a higher mound. Why they didn't see that before, I don't know, because these guys are West Point graduates. But, well, anyway. Anybody else? Anything, comments? How many of you had any ancestors in the war? Yankee or Rebel? So did he sign up for like a 3-month thing or? Yeah, that was common. I have a discharge paper that came from Lisa's godfather. His name was John, or his name was Klinger, not John, but his name was Klinger. He signed up for 3 months immediately following Gettysburg. And I say Gettys, and I know I told some of you this before. I had a guy putting a heating and cooling system in my parents' house in 2006. His name was Brian Gettys. And I jokingly said, so are you related to the people at Gettysburg? And he said, yes, I am. And we pronounce it Gettys. So everybody calls it Gettysburg, but Gettysburg, and even the guides out there, the National Park Service guys, they know, but they say Gettysburg anyway. But that's interesting. Do you have any of his stuff?
Yeah.
Oh, so you got copies? That's the good thing about the Union. I had an ancestor on the Shaw side, which my last name's Shaw, obviously, and he was killed at Malvern Hill fighting for the Union. but I know of at least 2 that were killed in Virginia fighting for the South, and others that were wounded. You had a comment or question, sir? Or you said you had ancestors in the war?
Yes.
Do you know anything about them?
General Sedgwick.
General?
Yeah. Great-grandfather.
Really?
Great-grandfather.
Was he down pretty far south, or do you know where he was?
He was in the, New York, it was the grand, he was in New York artillery outfit, running Washington.
Mm-hmm.
So people, my family all thought he was at Gettysburg, wasn't. During.
Well, Cushing was dead. You know, he died at Gettysburg. Alonzo Cushing. They just gave him posthumously awarded him a Congressional Medal of Honor about 12 years ago, 15 years ago. Yeah, he was at the angle as Longstreet's advance. They call it Pickett's charge was coming in. They had 4 artillery pieces. He had been wounded severely in the groin, and he was holding a rag, basically holding his guts in for about an hour and a half till they got across the wall, and then he got shot twice in the head, and that finally ended his agony. But Alonzo Cushing was a true hero. And sorry, not holding it up. Edward Everett.
His direct ancestors live off of.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Yeah, he was quite the orator. He rambled on for 2 hours. And then he said to Lincoln, I wish I could have gotten the point across as well as you did in 2 minutes. Yeah, yeah. And Lincoln stepped down. The only picture we got of Lincoln following that was November 19th. It was a Thursday of 1863, the dedication of the cemetery. The only picture we have of Lincoln is of him coming down the steps because they thought he was going to keep talking for a while. And when he got down, it was pretty much quiet. People didn't cheer or anything. And he said, I guess I kind of blew that. That's probably the most famous speech in American history. I mean, he nailed that. He nailed where we stood in the war at that time, and that those that had given last full measure, well, we all had to memorize it when we were kids. We got time. Let's say it together. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the principle that all created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war. Yeah. For any nation so conceived will long endure. Yeah, I know. But we had to memorize it. That's one good thing. Or any nation so conceived will long endure. Yes. Yes. It was great. I mean, and he didn't finish it until the night before. He was writing it on the train coming up, and he stayed at the Wills house there on the square. So any other quick comments? We're about 2 minutes behind. Yes, sir. Oh, then you know Jim.
Wednesday night, we have a meeting and we're going to proofread the 14 new wayside markers going to put up on the West Shore around this area, from Carlisle all the way to Mechanicsburg. Yeah. Okay. Carlisle Pike and stuff like that, Witcher and all those. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. Zinn and everything in Churchtown. Yeah.
Cool. So that's great.
Yeah. 14 new ones.
And I'm going to suggest something to you guys. What? You want to just repeat that?
Yeah. I'm a member of the Camp Curtin Historical Society. Curtin was the governor during the Civil War, good Republican buddy with Lincoln, helps with the Gettysburg Address and everything, setting that up. We are in the process. I have a meeting Wednesday night to proofread the layouts of 14 new historic markers that are going to be put up throughout our area. There will be 2 on the square, 2 at the Mechanicsburg Library, There's going to be one near the Pancake House, which is just directly up from the library where they were ordered to make pancakes for the Confederates all day long. And they should be up within 2-3 years or so. Very exciting.
And they are called waysides. And what they need is they need a cover because those things don't last more than 8 or 10 years. I know, and they're exposed. They should be covered with a folding aluminum cover because they're exposed to the elements all the time, sun, wind, all the time. And how often do people really read them? So, anything else anybody want to say? We're about out of time. If you're interested in looking at anything up here, feel free to come up. I don't want to go too far behind. Alexis will get mad at me. It's 4 minutes after now, so thank you. Thank you.